Hey, Walt, where's the ice gone?
Oh, damn, I don't know. I must have forgotten to refill the ice trays. Sorry, man. What do you need it for?
Oh, it's just so hot. I was thinking about having a cold whiskey.
Ah, well, real men just drink it straight out of the bottle, I hear.
Oh, yeah? Room temperature in Melbourne in December? Yeah, I feel real tough. If I drink it straight out the bottle, nice.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, nice.
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 No ice. No ice. We just don't have any ice. Sorry, James.
Damn. What the hell?
Look, it's nice. Is
We
what
just
I
went
hear.
like full toxic man for like a
Yeah.
solid minute.
Nice.
Nice. That's if you've never met a proper Australian man, they say the word nice as if it's spelled Noice.
I feel like the world is getting collectively more aware of this because they're now aware of the no thing.
Oh,
that
no. Cleo.
Cleo, no.
The
They're-
condensation.
The condensation, Cleo. Welcome to the Get Commanded podcast. It's the GCP brought to you by POG, Palms Off Gaming, sponsor of this podcast since 1969. I'm your host, Walt.
And hello, Commander players. I'm your other host, James, dual citizen of Australia and England, I promise.
That's what we are. That's us. That's me and James.
All right, we're going to start switching up our intros. I see how it goes. Look, before we get to the transmission, I did just want to let everybody know that this is actually our last episode of the year.
Yeah.
So thank you all so much for coming along. It's been an absolute pleasure to be in your cars, in your ears, when you're on a walk, at work with you, like in all the places that you listen to podcasts, in the shower with you.
We slipped pretty heavily into stalker territory there somewhere along the way.
It's been a pleasure to be following you on Cavill Avenue
your
while you're walking
ears.
home. But seriously, thank you guys so much. And look, if you guys want to support the content that Walt and I make moving forward into 2024, which, by the way, we are really looking forward to. We've got a lot of really exciting things lined up for 2024.
Big things.
You can do it on Patreon at patreon.com/getcommandedpodcast. There's a ton of great benefits for you, but also it means that Walt and I can do more of this stuff in more ways to give you more content to enjoy more often. More.
Just have more. That's
Make more.
how you should live your life.
I mean, that's what like 80% of our like direct messages are when listeners like contact us. It's like, hey, you guys gonna make more stuff?
Yeah, they just send the Kylo Ren gif. Just the
more.
Anyway, we have an incoming transmission from the deep depths of the galaxy, from the Space Commanders. It's time to get commanded.
Mastering Commander requires training and practice, and there are principles that will serve you well in this pursuit. Principles that are familiar to one who has engaged in a physical training regime.
Physical training regime is in like actually working out.
Yeah, I think like the gym.
Like, so like training for Commander. Are we going to get like a Rocky montage of us like playing?
I reckon we might be. I mean, look, I think sometimes the Space Commanders are choosing one of us without telling us they're choosing one of us.
Well, considering you go to the gym probably like 4, 5, 6 times a week, and I
Yeah.
haven't been in a year, I'll hand this one over to you. I mean, look, I have gone to the gym in the
Yes.
past. Like, I used to be a bit of a junkie, but
Yeah.
not a lot anymore. I think like probably the last time I was like probably in a strong training regime, like going at least 4 times a week, was probably 2021. So it's been a while.
Yeah.
like just post-pandemic.
Yeah, I do remember that phase.
Because I went through like a big workout phase in the pandemic. I dropped like 16 kilos in like 6 weeks.
I was thinking of 2020, where you were definitely doing all those like home workouts and stuff, and you were like running around the block while we were in lockdown.
Yeah.
You were like
It was a good excuse to get the hell out of the house.
Well, yeah. But both of us were. I was also working out at home during that time. It's funny. I don't know what it was like for people overseas and stuff, but 2020, I feel like we had this like certain amount of motivation. Whereas by the time 2021 came around, we were also like exhausted with COVID, especially in Melbourne, where we had so many lockdowns and so for so long that we were just kind of like, yeah, I'm done.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have been weight training for about 10 years, maybe slightly longer than that.
And it shows.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm not a professional by no means. However, I have like kept up with like fitness people for a long time.
I've seen your YouTube subscribers.
Yeah.
Like, or the people you subscribe to on YouTube. Yeah.
Look, I will say, you know, I'm watching people summarize papers. I'm not going out and reading papers. I'm not like that level of dedicated. But that said, if you follow enough of these different people, you sort of tend to keep up to date with what the latest advice is on stuff. And I have been, I've got the lived experience of training for about 10 years.
So what you're saying is we're going to look at what a physical training regime looks like.
Yes.
And then we're going to translate that into like commander world where we're training for, like, if our physical health is all about like keeping us able to, you know, move about daily, complete daily tasks without like losing breath, and then perform at peak physical performance, whether we're running or playing a sport. Commander is like our daily life of just getting an average game in and then sitting down and maybe playing a really serious, high-powered game. That's like our running exercise. Is that what you're kind of going for here?
It's a very spiky episode, I guess is what's likely to happen here. But I think it should be interesting. I think the way we'll do it, I think there's about 6 like key training principles that I think in some way translate into Commander. Some of them won't be as obvious as others, so we'll walk you through it until we get there. But look, this should probably also give you a little bit of like general fitness advice. I've been sure to not include anything that I think is like really contentious. Like, I'm not going out here and like giving you a hot take in terms of fitness. Pretty much all the stuff I'll say will be pretty like established, scientifically known stuff.
Because there's some stuff in like the fitness world where it's like, you know, working out to failure is
that's contentious.
That's a real contentious thing.
Yeah.
I've had multiple personal trainers, and like I've had one that says it's great and another one that says you're an idiot if you do it. So it's
like that. I'm not going to recommend, we're not going to mention any of that stuff because we don't want to give you bad advice.
Yes.
All that said, though, neither of us are health professionals or, you know, like trained in this area at university or anything like that. So if anything we say contravenes medical advice that you've received, obviously go with the medical advice. But look, again, the main thing is we're using this structure of the cool tips we'll have about working out and we're applying it to getting better at playing Commander and having better Commander games.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I feel like Commander is something that we take for granted a lot of the time. We're like, we just go out and do it, and we forget it takes practice.
Yeah, it does. Which brings me to the first of our principles, I reckon, here, which is put in the reps.
Like, actually practice.
You actually have to put in the reps. So for those who are like brand new to any sort of exercise regime, especially one in the gym, the pretty much every good weight training regime is based on this idea of progressive overload. So
I am familiar with this term, but go on and explain.
Yeah, so progressive overload is basically the idea of steadily and slowly increasing the load that is placed on your muscles over time. And when I say over time, I'm not saying over a single workout, I'm saying over months, years even, kind of thing. So very slowly your muscles will get stronger. And usually this is done through weight. So you might have a certain number of so let's say a bench press, right?
Sure.
Let's say that the way my routine is structured, I'm going to be doing 3 sets of 8 reps of a barbell bench press, right?
Yep.
What I will aim to do is if I can do 40 kilos this week for 3 sets, 8 reps, I'll do that this week. And then next week, I'll try and do 42.5 kilos, like the smallest increment I possibly can. And I'll try and do that. If I can get 8 reps for 3 sets of that, great. I'll do the same thing again, 45. 47.5 and keep incrementally increasing like that.
Until you're benching 245.
That's it. It's the goal. But yeah, this is basically how your muscles get stronger. Is in order to like actually build the structures that make them stronger, they have to be placed under increasingly difficult loads. Like if you just keep on doing 40 kilos to your bench press, they're
never going to get able to be stronger than that.
Yes, so they'll grow to match the fact that you're doing that amount of weight, but they can't ever get any bigger than that because you're just using the same stimulus again and again. So that's like all training regimes are based essentially around that fact. Some of them go about it in a really wacky way where they'll like, you get those like 8-week challenges sort of workouts where it's
that's
like
the ones that I usually do because I'm what they call a yo-yoer. So like I'll go like hardcore working out, eating like half my daily recommended calorie intake, losing 20 kilos, and then being like, I look great. I'm gonna celebrate at the pub with 4 pints and a huge plate of chips.
bit boom and bust. Maybe.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
It's a tough one to balance like the different aspects of it. But yeah, the sort of 8-week ones that they'll do will literally tell you. They'll be like, you're going to do 5 kilos, you're going to do 10 reps of bicep curls this week, and then, you load up your workout for next week, and it's like, cool, now you're doing 20 reps of those 5 kilos, or you're doing 25, or you're doing 7.5 kilo dumbbells instead of 5 or whatever. So this is like built into those routines. But if you train for an extended amount of time, you do exactly the same thing, except you're usually doing it with weight. So yeah, this is what we call volume as well, by the way. So volume is like the total amount of the weight and the reps that you do, and normally you just multiply them together. So you can actually calculate volume by going 40 kilos for times 8 is 320.
Damn, the boy's good at math.
That seems right.
I'm not even thinking about it. I'm going to let the listeners tell you if you're wrong.
320, and then if I'm doing 3 sets, 320 by 3 would be 640, 980, I think.
So that's your
960,
volume?
960. So that would be my bench press volume for that thing. You don't normally do it in this way, but that's what volume actually is.
Oh, so it calculates like it kind of holistically, like how much you're lifting and how many times you're lifting it.
Yes,
gotcha.
All of it together becomes volume.
Yeah.
And yeah, in order to get stronger, you need to increase your volume. So if you're playing Commander, you also need to put in the reps. You need to play Commander.
This makes a lot of sense. But I see where you're going with this like progressive overload approach, because you're saying that if you just play one game of Commander every week, your muscles, your Commander skills, are not going to grow beyond the skill and strength of one game every week. Is that what you're saying?
I think it's not exactly as one-to-one as that, because I think Commander games are also different, right? It's not like you sit down and play the exact same Commander game every week, because that would be stagnating. I agree with you. If you were just sat there and you played with exactly the same pod, exactly the same decks, drew the same opening hand, like that would stagnate you. But Commander has so much variance built in.
So the volume is a lot harder to calculate in Commander. Yeah.
I think the increase in volume is not so much of a thing here, but it is important that you still put in the reps. Like basically that whole analogy I was making about the gym was just to say, if I didn't go to the gym and do bench press, I can't get stronger at bench press, can I? Like it cannot physically happen.
Yeah.
And likewise for Commander, it seems obvious, but I think a lot of the time, especially with new players, they so think they need to master the deck. They're like, if my deck was just a bit better, I would win. And it's like, not necessarily. Like, there's probably things you might need to improve about your deck.
From a deck building perspective.
Yeah. I think new players get stuck on the deck itself and like how they can improve it, and like, oh, if I just had a better board wipe and better card draw, maybe I'd win. It's like, no, probably most of the thing you need to learn as a beginning player is just playing Commander and how Commander games end and how they progress. And you can't learn that without just playing lots of Commander.
Well, I mean, we've spoken about this before, and we've spoken about it in relation to the tinkerers versus architects theory about if you tinker with your deck a lot, you lose the purpose of the deck, or your piloting skills of that deck decrease because it's changing all the time. I feel like that's, kind of, if you want to make it a gym metaphor, it's like doing variations of a workout. So if you're doing like, if your Merrin deck, let's say, is a push-up as an exercise, the push-up is quite a simple exercise, and you know what you're meant to do. You keep your body straight, you push down, you push up, and you repeat that process. That is a push-up. We all know how push-ups work.
Yeah.
But variations of push-ups exist. You can do diamond push-ups, which is more working out your triceps, which is where you put your hands kind of together in a diamond shape in the middle of your chest, push down like that, and that works out a different muscle group. So the variation is kind of like you going, okay, I've built this Merrin deck, and now I'm learning how to do a push-up. But before I even master the push-up, I'm going to change quite a drastic thing about how this deck works. And I'm not going to be as strong as a regular push-up because it's now working out a completely different muscle group.
Yeah. Yeah, it's there's so many factors in Commander, I guess is what I'm saying. I have a question for you at this point. So I think we agree that just like playing Commander in general helps you to improve at playing Commander.
The phrase practice makes perfect exists for a reason.
And it definitely applies to Commander. Do you think that there is like progressive overload in Commander? Like in that, do you think there are ways to, like in the same way that in the gym we went from 40 to 42.5, 45 for the bench press or whatever?
Yes.
Do you think there's a way to do that in Commander?
Yes.
What do you reckon it is?
I think I'm coming from a CDH place of mind as well.
That's where my mind goes to.
Because I think that, especially with this, if you look at Commander as this power scale, which we don't agree with, again, I'll say it again on the podcast, the power number scale for Commander decks is stupid.
Doesn't work.
But if we were to use it,
Sure.
and we are playing decks that sit in that kind of casual 4 to 5 range, I think that's your kind of like base mark of like where you're starting to lift Commander deck weight. When you go up in power, there becomes more variance and more things to think about, and more, I think form is a lot more important if you want to use the gym metaphor. If you're saying like doing a bench press with a light weight, your form is not as important if you were doing it with a very heavy weight, because you could really injure yourself with a heavy weight and you could really make a mistake. I'm not saying form isn't important if you're using lightweight, because you should practice form, but that's the thing, right? You should practice your form even when you're using low weights. So even in casual games, you should think like you're playing a high-powered game.
Yeah.
And because that way you're assessing threats better in Commander, which is like, let's say that's your back arch if you're doing a bench press.
Sure.
Let's say you're assessing threats better. You're like prioritizing card draw and card advantage. That's your breathing. Let's say that's your breathing routine when you're like doing like 1 rep in and 1 rep out, pushing out. I think that there is a real direct translation here of, as you move up the power level, those really key form factor pieces of when you're practicing at low weights come into it. And then when you hit CDH, all of those have to be in perfect unison for you to win. Because I've said it before about CDH, is the first person to make a mistake in CDH is usually the first person to lose.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same with working out. If you like slip in your form, I think you've lost that set. And it's probably a good idea to reset.
Well, and if CDH is upping the weight, if you're taking your form and applying it in CDH, in the gym, you will notice very quickly if your form is poor and you attempt a heavy weight, because you'll injure yourself.
Yes.
And in the case of CDH, yes, you'll
lose. You'll just get kicked out.
Your poor form will be apparent because you will make mistakes and they will cost you the game. I have, by the way, I think I have won either 0 or 1 CEDH games ever.
You've definitely won at least 1, because I remember.
You remember
the game.
one? Okay.
I remember the
that
game.
That might be the only one.
Well, I think you got down like a turn 1 root maze, and then just like kept
usually
deploying really good solid stacks pieces for like the entire game.
The stacks win con is just like, go first, have the right stacks piece.
Yeah.
That's just like, if you have it.
Good form.
Yeah, good form.
But no, I think I don't want our listeners to misinterpret what I'm trying to say here. That like, because we're going about this episode by trying to increase your capacity and your ability to hold volume in the gym, which is our Commander games, right?
Yeah.
I don't want people to think that the goal is playing CDH.
No.
But if you are lifting weights, you want to increase your capacity, even if you don't have the goal or the end goal of a bodybuilder's physique. You're not trying to get to a muscle that's, you're not trying to get your biceps to look like my thighs.
No.
Like, some people just don't want that.
Yeah.
And some people just don't want to play CDH.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying CDH or really high-powered Commander is the goal, but if you do want to improve, make sure when you are playing these casual games that you're focusing on your form, which is things like threat assessment, prioritizing card draw, deploying your win cons, thinking about board wipes, basically every other episode of this podcast.
Yeah.
And then if you do want to go down progressive overload, start playing a little bit of higher powered games. See
Yeah.
what your form looks like when people are playing higher powered decks.
Yeah.
How do you stack up against a Miram deck that's like really tuned and getting dragons on dragons out?
Yeah.
How's your threat assessment when there's 2 of everything?
Yeah.
There you go.
And I think as well, like you can, to go about it a slightly different way, you can do a similar thing by restricting yourself in some way in the way that you're building your decks. So you can, like cut all the tutors from your decks. That'll teach you a lot about card draw.
It'll make you prioritize stuff. That's kind of
Yeah.
like doing a workout that really isolates a muscle.
Yeah.
Like, if you've ever used you've used the bicep curl machine.
Yeah, you cannot cheat on a bicep curl machine.
There is no swinging your arms
Nope.
on those. That really says you got to use your muscle here.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, it's funny we've already gone into it, but my second principle was learn good form.
Oh, there you go.
So
I feel like these
you're right
two
in the
times.
groove.
Yeah, I'm in the gym. Let's do it.
But what I'd given here was, if we go back to that bench press again, you will not obviously get everything out of it if you're only going halfway down when you're lowering the bar down to your chest. If you're going halfway down and back up again, that is actually a valid way of workout, by the way. It's called partial rep. Some people swear by those. But you are not, fundamentally, it is not the same exercise as when you went all the way down and all the way back up.
If your goal is to do a full bench press,
Yeah.
you're not doing a full bench press.
Well, and
you're not practicing it.
Most of the time, partials are found to be worse than just doing the full range of movement because the stretch makes a big difference in the exercise. But yes, in terms of learning good form, my analogy here was actually that you need to, if you're trying to learn how to do a bench press in the gym, you probably will go on YouTube. You'll look up someone. Jeff Nippard is fantastic, by the way. Jeff Nippard might have a video on how he does his bench press. And he'll give you a rundown on the different cues that he has in terms of where he puts his arms, how he positions his chest, rolls his arms back, that kind of thing. And that's how you learn to do that. You might even have someone who you train with at the gym who's more experienced than you. And you might just go hey, Bill, can you please have a look at my bench press form? And he'll be like, yeah, actually you should do it more like this, more like this. Learn good form. In Commander, I think you need to watch better players play the game.
I was like, where are you going with this? I was like, maybe watching your opponents, but we're so lucky.
Yeah.
There are YouTube channels on YouTube channels of really great Commander players that you can watch how they play.
You can watch Brian Kibler. Brian Kibler is a Pro Tour winning Magic player.
One of my favorite Magic players of all time, by the way.
He's also fantastic.
Yeah.
But yeah, on Commander at Home, he plays, I think they release an episode pretty much every week. It's him and Olivia Gobert-Hicks and then 2 other guests that rotate through. Great vibe. We've recommended them before. But Brian Kibler is an absolutely outstanding Magic player, and it definitely applies to Commander as well. He just will say stuff about how he's thinking about his turn, and you kind of go that makes so much sense.
I've never thought about waiting and sandbagging in this way. Or there was a couple of episodes that I've watched with him about him talking about the crackback of having, if he swings out now, yes, he does a ton of damage, but he will probably lose in 2 turns on the crackback. And he's thinking not immediate turn death, but he's thinking 2-3 turns ahead. And the consequences of the crackback in 3 turns.
Yeah.
And I've never thought about it like that. And that now when I play Commander, especially when I'm playing decks that are more aggressive and attacky, I'm thinking about the consequences a little bit more. And that's I guess a part of my form in playing Commander.
Yeah. No, I've learned a lot by watching Brian Kibler. I've learned a lot watching pretty much all of Rachel, Josh, and Jimmy when they play on game nights and on extra turns. They make lots of decisions that are not immediately obvious, but you'll learn if you watch them a lot, like prioritizing hitting land drops. They'll draw a bunch of cards on a turn if they haven't got a land in hand. That's important, and you should do that. They might wait to deploy a board wipe until the board's a bit more gunged up. They might sandbag strong cards in their hand until the turn they want to win.
I've learned so much about how to politic from JLK than anyone else on the planet. If you want to learn how to really wheel and deal in Commander, JLK is the king of it. And it's a running joke on game nights that he's the politic player.
Yeah.
But the reason it's a joke is because it's very real. He's very good at it. There was the one episode with him and the professor. He made, I think it was the March, or maybe Brothers War, I think was the set.
They did the recent one, Lost Caverns of Ixalan, or was it older than that?
No, it's an older one. It's the one where the professor melds Mishra, so I'm pretty sure it's Brothers War.
Probably Brothers War, yeah.
And JLK just perfectly gets what he wants out of that deal. He
Right.
says no attacks and all this kind of stuff. And then the professor ends up cheating on the deal, which I think is horrific. But like the way he does that deal was just sublime. He, everything he said was like a win for the professor. So much so that the professor was like, yes, of course, immediately. And that's what I learned about politics was if you put the wins for your opponent first, they kind of stop listening after that. And then they stop listening about what's in it for you.
Those are all of the things that I want.
Yes, like
I can have everything that I want. And there are no conditions because I haven't heard them yet.
Yeah, no consequences. I know I'm thinking about it and James is still talking. I've forgotten what he's saying. But like now I will always open a political deal with, I won't remove your thing that you want to keep. And then the player's like, woohoo, I'm not listening anymore. I agree.
Nice. Yeah, I can see that you would learn that from JLK. He is very, very good at sneaking those things in there. I think one thing I will say, you can learn this stuff by watching those players play. However, the one thing you never see in those shows, sometimes you see parts of it, is people's hands. Sometimes people, like in game nights in particular, they obviously have the cutaways. Someone might be like, oh, I have this card in my hand that can answer this, but I'm going to wait. So that's like, as much as you'll know, you never see someone's full hand on a game like this. And I do think you kind of, especially when you're starting out, you kind of need to see the avenues people have and which one they choose to go down. So if you're like new and you're just trying to get better at Magic in general, I do think watching Commander is great, but mostly you should go and watch someone stream on Twitch.
Like playing Arena.
And playing Standard or something.
Yeah.
And just watch them like draw their cards and go like, oh, okay, I know they probably have this in hand, so I'm going to play this and then this. Like you'll learn so much about like when people hold cards in their hand and when people like throw cards on the table as fast as they can. Like you'll see the way that people prioritize the cards in their hand.
And even just like talking through the thoughts. Like now that we've streamed a couple of times, I find that accidentally, because I'm trying to entertain our stream and the chat, I'll talk through my thought process, which is giving information to my opponents, which you shouldn't do. But like, I'll talk about whether or not I feel like it's the right time to go for a win.
Yeah.
Or it should be, I need to progress my board state more, or it's, I need to answer the threats on the board.
Yeah.
Like, and I'll talk through the reasons I think that the threats on the board are worse than if I try and go for a win. You know, those kinds of thought processes. So like, yeah, come join our stream and I'll just show you my hand if you want.
So just give you the rundown. Yeah, it's true. My third principle here is that some exercises are essential. And I will elaborate here because this one's not such an obvious comparison.
Sure.
So what do you mean, Walt? Some exercises are essential. Well, when you're building a training regime, and certainly when you're looking at one that someone's provided to you, in general, you have to have a pretty good reason to avoid some exercises because they're so good. Like the barbell squat, for instance. If you were building a leg routine and you didn't include the barbell squat, you're just kind of missing out. Not to say you can't, but compound movements like the barbell squat that utilize a bunch of muscle groups at the same time. Your squats are utilizing your quads, your glutes, even to a small extent your calves. You're training so many parts of your body in the one movement. It's just
even
like
your core, like holding your position correctly is quite a lot of core.
Yeah, it's just giving you so much bang for your buck, and you'll get so much stronger in that movement because you're using so many muscle groups. So like if all of those muscle groups just grow a tiny, tiny bit, you get stronger and you get stronger and you get stronger. And so you can like ramp up the weight on these squats so quickly. And like we were saying earlier, the volume is really important for those muscle groups. And if you can get high volume on that exercise, you're going to make great progress.
Right.
So you don't have to have a barbell squat in every single routine. There are totally valid routines that don't have them in there, but you have to have a really great reason to not include it. Like, oh, someone's got an injury, or my knees are not so good at this specific movement. I think I'd be better off doing like a goblet squat or something like that.
I think I can see where you're going with this. The language that you're using is reminding me of some advice we've given about a certain topic of Commander.
So again, and I'm going to have one last little one that is also analogous to this example that's in your mind. You need to have a really great understanding of how these things work before you understand when it's okay to cut a barbell squat from your routine.
I am so with you in what you're trying to say here now.
So in Commander, card draw, ramp, and removal are
Yes.
essential.
This
okay?
is so we're now looking at the deck building part of your Commander
Yes.
journey, because I think Commander is not just playing Commander.
No.
It is building your deck and editing your deck and understanding the social aspect and actually playing the game. There is many different dimensions to playing.
Yeah.
And the deck building is kind of where it starts, I guess, or like some people buy a pre-con, but the deck building process for that deck is where it starts.
Well, and every game that you have is based on your deck building,
Yes.
right? It has to be. The cards that you put in
Yeah.
affect the game that you have.
And in our deck building episodes, we have said multiple times, our template shows you what you should have at minimum and as an expectation of what a commander deck should be.
Yeah.
And
the numbers, by the way, for those who don't keep up, card draw, we say at least 15. Ramp, we say I'd aim for about 10.
10 or up, yeah.
And removal, at least sort of 7 or 8, and ideally close to that 10 mark as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you say, we've said before when we've provided those numbers, these are just a guide. We think they're a really great starting point for your deck, but when you completely understand deck building and have built a lot of decks, you might understand when it's okay to play very little ramp, or when it's okay to play more removal or less removal. But as with the barbell squat, you need to have a really great reason to omit those cards from your deck, and you also need to understand why it's okay to remove those things from your deck. Like with the barbell squat, you need to understand why you're removing the squat from your routine.
For example, card draw, as we know, we recommend like minimum 10, 15 is like your aiming point when you're building a deck. In my Yuriko deck, I have in Moxfield tagged as card draw 4 pieces of card draw.
Yep.
Because my commander is putting multiple cards in my hand every single turn.
Yeah.
So I know the importance of card draw as an experienced commander player, but I also understand that I'm getting it elsewhere.
Yeah.
So I'm getting card advantage from my commander by putting these cards into my hand.
Yeah.
So I can reduce the amount of actual card draw I have in my deck, so I can do that. So that's me removing the barbell squat.
Yeah.
Like, I can actually take that out of my regime, because let's say I'm doing 20 other exercises throughout my week that kind of hit every other muscle group that I need to hit with the barbell squat.
Yeah.
So I don't need to do that specific exercise every single leg day.
No, and look, there are people who train for a very specific purpose. Like, there are people who play basketball, and so all of their leg workouts that they choose, this is my brother who played basketball for a long time, all the leg workouts that my brother chose were based on the things that he knew would affect his basketball game.
So I'm assuming, like, in basketball, those explosive movements.
Is all of it, right? Like, you need to be able to jump very high and very fast. Change direction really fast. So all of his different exercises that he chose, and by the way, he was an exercise science. He studied exercise science at uni, so he had the skill set to do this, but he chose the different variations of exercises based on how explosive they were and how likely they were to hit extremely important muscle groups like his calves.
Yep.
So he might have the basis to remove a barbell squat from his routine because he knows what he's gunning towards. In the same way that, when you play Yuriko, you understand, okay, I'm gunning towards a turbo-y kind of win.
Yep.
And also, my commander puts cards in my hand. Yuriko also very rarely does not come out on turn 2. Turn 3 at the latest,
So
really?
you don't even... and this is the other thing about, like, Yuriko, for example. Let's use another deck, for example, because I was going to say Yuriko has a very weird mana curve, but the cards that you play are at a very low end.
Yeah.
So you don't even necessarily need to prioritize ramp in that deck
No,
either. So
no.
like, it's one of those weird decks where you can look at 2 of the main core exercises and go, fuck them.
It's gone, yeah.
But like, okay, let's look at another deck, for example. Let's look at, I've got a good example. Phylaf, my landfall deck.
Yep.
This is a landfall deck, and it's also a very big mana deck. The mana curve is ridiculously high. So when I look at my ramp category, for example, I know that I need to be going up on ramp because I need the landfall triggers for a start.
Yeah.
And I need the mana late game.
Yeah.
So instead of doing, let's say 3 reps of 12 barbell squats on leg day, I'll do barbell squats on my core day as well.
Yeah.
And I'll probably throw them in on like my, chest and upper body day just to keep the volume up.
Yeah. Because you need it.
Yes.
Yeah. 100%.
So, like, there you go. You don't have to necessarily look at it as cutting the exercises, but you could look at it also as increasing them because that's what your deck needs.
Yes. And yeah, it's very one-to-one there where, you have decks that, your father's deck probably has 20 pieces of ramp in it.
Well, it's probably like 28.
Yeah. But, that's, quote, twice the volume. So you can do it. We have lots left to talk about, including 3 more training principles. But before that, I think we'd better take a thrifty interlude.
Yeah, this is the bit in your exercise where you look at the clock and watch it and go, I'll take a 30-second rest. Then your heart rate hasn't slowed down. So you go, you know what? It's the day I deserve. I'll take 30 seconds more and then I'll get back into it. And it doesn't cost you much. It doesn't cost you a heap in your exercise, but you can take the break. That's what the thrifty interlude is.
I'm going to have the tiniest of tangents because you've reminded me. There's been some recent research into the amount of rest that you take in your routine versus the amount of progress that you make. So obviously the way that people usually break it down is like early exercises like a bench press, they might give you 2 or 3 minutes to rest between sets. And then for like bicep curls, they might say just wait a minute or whatever, right? They found that the amount of time that you wait doesn't matter, in that the longer you wait is always better. So in a perfect world, you would wait 3 to 4 minutes between every single exercise because volume always wins. If you wait longer, you will do more volume, and more volume means you'll make better progress over time.
So anyway, I was right with what I said.
Yeah.
I was actually like bang on the money.
Yeah, you could take longer. That's
Nailed
why
it.
I had to throw it in there.
That's awesome.
Anyway, magic cards. Let me hear a little something about a thrifty card. So as is tradition, I will be performing a monologue, and this week the card is brought to life in monologue form from the perspective of someone in the card's art. James, would you like to read us the card we're featuring this week?
I sure would. We're looking at an aura this week. It's Canopy Cover. For 1 and a green, you'll get an aura that enchants creature. Enchanted creature can't be blocked except by creatures with flying or reach. It also says enchanted creature can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control.
Come, shelter with me beneath the great soul tree. All your regrets, your misdeeds, lost loves and failed dreams, the great soul tree remembers, but beneath its branches nothing of you can be seen. Once I was a great adventurer, known everywhere for his mighty deeds. Many bandits and other foul men fell to my sword, and a far greater number of fine people called me their protector. But time, fickle as she is, was not kind to me. And soon there were many heroes of far greater caliber, stronger, faster, and cleverer than I. Now that I rest beneath this old tree, I doubt that I exist within the memory of any within this world. Betwixt these sacred boughs, long ago in my childhood, I had no name at all, not even one that the great tree would know. But on the sands of Robaran, Jedit O'Janen they called me. Get budgeted!
That makes sense. Lore.
It's not. It's definitely not actually supposed to be Jedit O'Janen
I
in
don't
the art
think
of that card.
For those that don't know, Jedit has been a weird inside joke for the Thrifty Thursdays lore.
This was the first one, actually, was that I'd snuck him in here.
Oh, is that wow, this is an old one then.
Yeah, this
Canopy
is
cover.
like Thrifty Thursdays 38 or something like that. And then people were like, oh my god, it's Jedit O'Janen. This is around the time that they had that Wizard Store promo. For those who don't know, Jedit O'Janen is like a 7 mana 4/4. And that's only text on the card.
That's it. I think it's a 5/5.
Maybe 5/5.
I think it's a 5/5.
He's 4 white blue or something like that for a 5/5
And
with
it's
no
a
other
legend
abilities.
from way back.
Might even be from Legends.
From Legends,
I think it could be.
so,
Yeah. Anyway, and they did a Wizard Store promo that was just like a full art textless one because there's no text that you need to put on there. Anyway, so it's a bit of a meme around the store, and so I included him in here as kind of like a little nod, and then famously had one about people stealing each other's faces, and someone who was dressed as Gideon took off his face, and it was Jedit O'Janen or something like that. Anyway,
Canopy Cover is a great card.
Canopy Cover is a very good card. Interestingly, people often are like, "Oh, so it just has hexproof because it says it can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control." That's hexproof, right? No, because you could theoretically put this aura on a creature you don't control.
If like a Voltron commander or something?
Yeah.
Oh, I love
and then
this.
it still says it can't be the target of spells or abilities my opponent's control.
So
if
you can still target it.
I can still target it. James can't if I put it on James's thing.
Weird.
Whereas if I gave it hexproof always refers to its controller. So
Yeah.
if I give you James's commander hexproof, it's got hexproof from me.
Yeah.
But this is not hexproof because it can do that. So strange.
God, there's some of these like auras that have these kind of keyword-like abilities before the keyword was a thing.
Yeah.
Like Soul Link.
Spirit Link.
Spirit Link is the one I'm
which
thinking of.
Theoretically was lifelink, except it's a triggered ability, so it's not lifelink, which means you can give it to a creature with lifelink and basically have double lifelink.
Double lifelink. Then give the creature double strike. Quadruple lifelink.
I love Armadillo Cloak for that in
Yes.
any
Selesnya
Selesnya.
Enchantress thing.
Yeah. Plus
Sick.
2/2 trample and not lifelink, but lifelink.
Kind of lifelink.
If you liked that, you can see those thrifty things released every Thursday in the Greensboro Commander Community Discord server, which is linked in the show notes, in the Thrifty Thursdays channel. So you can check those out there.
Yeah, and get involved in all the lore. But we need to get back to the gym.
The training principles. Yes.
So we've done 3. You got
Yeah.
3 more.
Got 3 more.
Hit me. Don't actually hit me. You're very strong. I'm very
From the
intimidated
gym.
by it. Yeah.
From my training
He's actually
principles.
sat there with crossed arms and his hand like sat.
I know.
Don't uncross them like you're embarrassed by that. He was like cupping his biceps.
It made it seem like I was like threatening you, like say something, I dare you.
He is every week.
Yeah.
Every time we record, I'm being threatened. I'm being held here against my will, people.
I'm always so shocked when people are like, because I've been, reasonably built for a good chunk of my life. People have been like, yeah, it's intimidating. And I'm like, I spend so much of my life trying to be the least intimidating person ever.
Okay, I will clarify. Like, you are very well chiseled. It's like Michelangelo chiseled you himself. But you are not an intimidating person.
Okay.
It's just when you are silent and show that you're chiseled. That's when it's intimidating.
I remember once, like, I lost a bunch of weight, like, I cut down a little bit, and so I lost, like, a little bit of muscle mass, but a lot of just my general mass.
Sure.
And someone was like, oh, good, you're a lot less scary now. And I was like, what? I was scary before. What? To who? Anyway, I'm not scary, I promise. The 4th training principle.
If you want to look like Walt.
Speaking of trimming down a bit, the 4th principle is you might need to cut.
Cutting in like the gym world
Yes.
is where you are trying to lose body fat.
But keep muscle.
But
So-
keep muscle, yeah.
The way this normally breaks down, so by the way, this is a very, very simplified way of looking at it, but basically the way that you either gain or lose weight is you are either in a caloric surplus or a caloric deficit. Caloric is just coming from the word calorie,
Calories,
which is just energy, the amount of energy in food. So let's say there's an apple with 5 calories in it. I don't know how many calories are actually in an apple. That forms a total amount of food that you eat in a day,
Yeah.
right? You have some apple, you have some porridge for breakfast, you might have some toast for lunch, whatever. Like the total number of that is a number and it can be measured, and that's the amount of food you've eaten today.
Yeah.
In exactly the same way, your body has a certain amount of energy that it burns just by existing, right? Like your brain has to function, your stomach has to digest stuff, your heart has to beat, you have to walk and
Yep.
step. It varies actually quite a lot between people how much people just generally burn on a daily basis, because some people bodies are extremely active.
Well, and other people have like different, like, I work in an office and some of my mates
Yes.
work on labor side.
That's going to make a huge difference.
Huge difference.
Huge difference. But even the amount people, if me and you sat in a room and didn't move for 8 hours, we would actually burn different amounts of energy, partly related to the size of our bodies. That's one, because every cell in our body is using energy.
I've got like more body to pump blood round, for
So
example.
There's more energy being consumed for that reason. But likewise, there's actually these sets of behavioral and psychological things that do vary quite a lot between people. Like if someone's got a restless leg, for instance, that actually burns a certain amount of energy, across the
My
day.
knee is actually bouncing.
Funnily
back.
enough, I also have a restless leg. But anyway, the gist of it is there's a certain amount of energy your body burns. You can vary it, of course, by exercising.
Yeah.
That will burn more energy than you normally would. And likewise, if you sat and didn't do anything for an entire day, like if you worked in an office, that would also burn less energy.
Yeah. But to boil it down, it's basically like the calorie deficit versus calorie surplus is, are you putting into your body more than you are putting out, or are you putting out more than you are putting in?
Yes.
If you're putting out more than you're putting in, you're in a deficit.
Yes.
If you are putting in more than you're putting out, you're in a surplus.
Yeah. And the way that your body will adapt to this is depending on the size of the surplus and the deficit. If you're in a big surplus, your body will need to store energy in some way. So it will usually do this in the form of fat. But if you've been exercising in a weight training regime, it will store some amount of it as muscle as well. Like you need the protein and also the energy to actually build the muscle. And then, yes, if you're in a deficit, your body will try to lose whatever weight it can. It will actually usually, its default way of doing this is to burn your muscle cells. But if you provide a training stimulus and then
use the muscles,
use the muscles regularly through training, then your body will be resort to burning fat cells instead.
So that's like what we refer to as the fat reserves. They're like the things that your body is holding onto so it can use it at a later date if it needs it. Because remember, our bodies are built to survive. That's like their whole function. So
they're not built for training.
Exactly. Our bodies are built for survival. So if you tell your body it's in a position where you need to use what we have because we're not getting enough input, it will go, right, well, to survive, I need energy. I'm not getting it from food.
Yeah.
Where else can I get it from? Okay, goodbye, stomach flab. You're now going to be used to help me walk every day.
Basically. But yeah, so look, I don't want to advocate any hectic diets or anything, but in order to lose fat from your body, if that's something you'd like to do, you will need to be in some amount of a caloric deficit. The healthiest and most sustainable ones are small deficits where you're only eating slightly less than your body is requiring to do its general things, and so you will very, very slowly lose body fat.
Literally just in the Thrifty interlude just before, we were talking about when I did a huge cut, and I was doing it in a very unhealthy way, and I felt horrible. It's really bad to do it in that way.
And also your body will burn up more of your muscle in that way as well. Going slowly lets your body keep some of the muscle. Anyway, that was a very long way of saying that a cut is a sort of bodybuildery, workout term for when you are intentionally in a deficit for an extended period of time where you're trying to maintain your muscle mass and reduce some of your fat. So the principle was you might need to cut, and it's because sometimes the way that you're going to progress with your training, it means you will have to cut down a little bit on what you're eating in order to, burn away some of that fat before you can build some more muscle.
But in Commander,
yes,
you're using the word cut. I'm assuming you're referring to cutting cards or cutting even decks.
Yes, right. That is exactly what I'm saying. So yes, there are things that are really fun. Like, when you're cutting for training, it might mean that you have to have less soft drink, or you might have to have takeout a bit less often, especially like McDonald's, which is very, very high in calories and not very nutritious for you. You might have to cut some of those things you really like out of your diet. In the same way in Commander, sometimes you will look at your deck, and the thing that you need to do to make that deck stronger is you might need to cut.
So look, we all have comfort meals, and personally, my comfort meal is a double cheeseburger from McDonald's. I will happily admit that.
No, respect.
It is the greasiest, tastiest thing that mankind has ever created. Yes, no, I was thinking about other options, but no, it is definitely.
You had a good think about it, but definitely.
No, it is my comfort meal, and I would argue that I have some cards in decks that are like my comfort cards, my pet cards. I know how they work. Like Sphinx of the Second Sun gives me a whole untap and upkeep and a draw step at the end of my turn. Who wouldn't want that? But it is 8 or 6, 7, 8 mana.
It's like
mana.
8 mana. 8 mana.
8 mana for a card. That is not healthy for a good mana curve, really, is it? When I'm looking at my mana curve, I don't want an 8-drop in a very efficient deck. Nor do I want a double cheeseburger in a very healthy, balanced diet. So it works as a perfect 1-to-1.
It's true. I mean, look, you might, you play Sphinx of the Second Sun in your Scarab God deck, right?
But that's where I can cheat it out.
Yes. But, in another deck, that might be superfluous, right? Like that card in a Blink deck, it's pretty strong to Blink, but it's not that strong to Blink. Well, actually, no, it's not strong to Blink at all.
It's not strong to Blink at all, but it does give you extra mana.
Let's say
an extra card.
Let's say you were building some sort of instant speed deck that wanted to leave up a bunch of mana.
Sure.
You might like Sphinx of the Second Sun because it untaps everything.
Gives me all the mana on my opponent's turn. It's kind of like a really bad Seedborn Muse.
Yeah, or what's the Splendid Reclamation? No, not Splendid Reclamation. The 4-mana enchantment. Wilderness Reclamation.
Oh, yeah.
And your end step untap all your
lands. Yeah.
It sort of would do a pseudo version of that. But it's 8 mana, and you're probably playing a deck that's full of instants that cost 1 or 2 mana if you're playing like a flashy kind of, that kind of a deck. 8 mana is probably too much for that effect. So
to
you might
invest
need to
into it, yeah.
You might need to cut that from the deck. And look, they're fun things usually. Most of the things we cut in Nutrition and in Commander are things that we like and things that are fun.
The double cheeseburger is great.
But for the sake of progressing in your training or progressing in your Commander and building better decks and having better games, sometimes you just have to take out those bad cards.
Yeah, I think that it's also about what you replace them with as well. And I think it's, you know, it's talking like that. Okay, Sphinx of the Second Sun in a response kind of flash speed deck is a great card because it untaps all your stuff at the end of your turn. But it would be better to replace it with a Wilderness Reclamation because it's less mana to invest. It doesn't mean you're tapping out on your turn. Maybe you're not. Maybe you don't have enough ramp in your deck to provide for that Sphinx of the Second Sun. So you need to replace it with some healthier alternative. So instead of getting the double cheeseburger, you can go and like replace it with like a protein bar or something like that. If your goal is to kind of build muscle, replace your double cheeseburger on the drive home from work with a protein bar.
Definitely.
Actually what I have done in the past.
Good stuff. You did allude to it already, but the other thing that you might need to cut is your decks.
Whole decks.
Sometimes a whole deck is just not good for you anymore. It's driving you crazy. It's making you angry. It's just not working, and it just has to go.
How have you gone with cutting decks recently, Walt?
I've disassembled pretty much every deck that I was not enjoying anymore.
Because we were also talking about this like just before I left for the UK. You cut nearly, like probably a good half of the decks you've created in the last year, maybe even all of them.
It's funny because I've always replaced them.
Yes, so you've got new ones.
Yeah. So it's hard to quantify sometimes. Like I forget how many I've disassembled because they've all been replaced, and often replaced in spirit.
And usually in the same deck box.
Yeah. And sometimes the same sleeves. So like my Sisay deck, my Shrines Sisay deck was replaced by Estrid, which is also an enchantments deck, but not a Shrines deck.
Yeah.
So
spiritual successor.
A lot of the cards like ported straight across. But yeah, totally. I've disassembled a lot of decks this year.
I am about to. I'll let some people know that I've been skimming the Space Commanders transmissions. And there's one that's addressed specifically to me. And I think
this is an equivalent of one that was addressed to me a little while ago. I
need to go through all my decks soon. And I am on the cusp of about to do a mass cut. And I feel like I'm about to do a gym cut. Like, it's that anxiety of like, oh my God, I'm going to have to really make some tough calls. And I do feel like it's going to be A, great for that episode, but B, good for me as a Commander player because like I have just an exuberant amount of decks, but some of them just sit on the shelves for ages and they gather dust. And some of them are like, there's like 5 cards missing because I ripped the cards out to put in another deck. And like
they're already kind of on the way out.
Yeah, and there's some decks that I really like and that have been sat there, but when I pull them out, they stay in my bag to go to the game store for weeks after that. So I'm now going to have to be really tough on myself about, right, what are the things I want to keep in my Commander regime and what are the things I want to get rid of? Like, for example, things like my dinosaur deck.
Yeah, you never pull that out.
I never pull it out anymore.
I've seen that about twice in the last 2 years, I reckon.
Probably. And like, it's one of those decks that I like have a lot of fun and it is honestly a cheat meal for me. That's what it feels like. It feels like an absolute cheat meal. It feels like a no-think, just play big dumb dino.
It's not making you grow as a Commander player when you play it.
No, but I could easily replace that with another Naya Creatures deck that actually does
definitely
increase my capacity as a Commander player.
Yeah. Look, I can say definitively that I don't miss any of the decks I've disassembled. I think ever.
I think some of them you're actually so happy to never see again.
Most of them. Most of them. Like, most of the time, when you start to get that little inkling in the back of your mind, like, this deck's not really that fun anymore, just get rid of it. Because that's the sign that it's time to be done. Because, like, you got to contrast it with, there are decks that you're, like, always happy to see. I've talked about this before, but, like, when I did the Command Zero for Catilda and Leah, I always love seeing that deck. I
Even
could
if you
literally play
lose
that
with
deck.
it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
could play that deck every other game. I could play that deck half of the time that I play Commander. I wouldn't be sad. Barbala Saga is similar. Kaza,
yeah.
Royal Chaser. Like, there's decks that I'm just like, that deck is sweet. I'm always happy to see it.
It's
and
me
there's-
with my Tornos deck.
Yeah.
Or
Even Zaxara, you've been playing a lot recently.
Yeah,
like,
I really enjoy that deck. I actually do want to tinker with that deck a little bit.
yeah, might need a couple
Yeah.
upgrades. Yeah. Well, there you go. That might be time for you to cut.
I
is what you're
appreciate
saying.
that. And I do feel like I'm on the precipice of a cut. And maybe
Yeah.
when I talk about all my decks in that upcoming episode, maybe I will do a little section on the things I cut and why I cut them.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to hear that. All right.
What's your fifth principle?
Principle number 5. Don't overtrain.
Ooh.
So this is a pretty common one. We spoke earlier about optimal volume.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can do unoptimal volume. I will say that in general, probably most people do less volume than they need to. Most muscle groups benefit from being exercised about twice a week, sometimes even more than that. Most people are aiming for about once a week, sometimes even less than that. So
That's why we have like leg days, arm days.
Yeah.
Is because we're referring to the time where we're focusing in on that group.
yes, and you should probably, if you're having a leg day, there should be 2 leg days in your week. Ideal world. However, you can definitely overdo it with training. People who overtrain, there's a bunch of different things that happen. Sleep quality goes down, and overall amount of sleep that you need.
Right.
There's much more lingering soreness that you get, and the absolute biggest one that's the most dangerous is you are far, far more likely to injure yourself because your joints and your muscles are fatigued even as you're arriving in the gym, and they're just not ready for the loads that you're putting them under.
Yeah, I've done it before. I've torn my chest.
Yeah.
I've had that before. Because like my body type is very top heavy. I'm a very big guy up the top. So when I was in the gym, I was like, okay, I just use that to my advantage. If I train my chest, my shoulders, and my back and my arms, I'm going to look huge. I'm going to look built. And I neglected my legs, but I overtrained the top of my body. And I did tear the left pectoral. Not horrifically, but
still.
But enough to put my arm in a sling for like a week.
Yeah.
Because it was like painful to move.
It's bad. It's bad. And we want to avoid it if we can. And look, there are so many narratives, especially if you're a man who goes to the gym, about, oh, you just need to push harder. And you need to get on that grind. And like, oh, you need to train to failure. Like all this stuff of like, you're not doing a workout properly unless you do it 110%. And
blood, sweat, and tears.
it's just nonsense. Like
It
all
is.
of the evidence out there about how hard you should push. By the way, in the gym, they have this thing called I'm blanking on the word, but there's basically a number scale of effort rating,
Right.
like between 1 and 10.
Sure.
Better than our power level scale because it actually works. But the easiest way to think about it is you can think about like how many more reps you could have done in a set, and you subtract that from 10. So a 10 would be literally like, okay, I've done absolutely every rep I possibly could. If I tried to do one more, I would fail. That would be a 10.
Yep.
A 5 would be, I could do 5 more reps of this. So like, the 40 kilo bench press we talked about before, I personally can bench press a lot more than that. I could probably, if I did 8 reps of that, I could do a lot more than 8 reps.
Yeah.
That might be like a 3.
You got more in the tank.
I've got more in the tank.
Yeah.
A lot more in the tank. So I might have like an effort rating of 2 or 3 on that.
Sure.
Mostly they find that about an effort rating of 8 is pretty much perfect. So you can have
Makes sense.
1 or 2 reps left in reserve. Reps in reserve is the other term they use for this. And you will achieve excellent progress. And actually, if you went higher, you might get less progress because of overtraining. You might overtrain the muscles, you might fatigue yourself, that kind of thing.
Well, and like also when you injure yourself, you have to stop training.
Yes.
So you're taking time out of your training, and that can really hurt you. Like I have friends that are professional athletes, and they have said like if they injure themselves and they have to take like, most of my friends are seasonal athletes, they're winter athletes.
Yeah.
They take a season off.
Yeah.
They are like a year behind in their like skiing ability.
Oh,
It's intense how much that affects you.
Yeah, and like you're not improving at all in that time, obviously. Like it's time off completely. So yes, you might in that like, let's say you train in like a 4-week period of time and you completely burn yourself out and then injure yourself and then have 3 months off. If you had 4 months where you were working at like even 70% effort rating, you would
still
have
doing it.
so much more total
Yes.
volume you've done over that time.
Okay, so I'm assuming in Commander, you're referring to like the burnout effect, right?
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
So we've talked about this explicitly once in the burnout episode. It was episode 27, a while ago now. But yeah, basically, like you can play too much Magic, you can play too much Commander, and you will end up burnt out. And like when you injure yourself from overtraining, you will probably just stop playing Magic completely. And yeah, you can't get better at Magic when you're not playing Magic. And we understand this is a very spiky episode about like, oh, you got to improve or whatever. But like, you know, it is good to improve as a Magic player, and it's good to become a better player and enjoy the decks that you play and the lines that you find more. And you need to continue to play Commander to do that. So yeah, yes, you could play Commander like 3 times a week for 3 weeks, then get exhausted with it, drop it for a month, and then come back. But if you just played Commander once a week and you've managed to continue that for a year, 2 years, you would improve so much more.
100%. And even like when you think about other like activities where people tell you to get on that grind, like I'm thinking studying, for example, preparing for a test. It's very common to hear professors and teachers and even your parents, if you're in high school, to say you need to take breaks.
Yeah.
Why would I need to take breaks? I need to cram as much information into my head as possible. It's because your headspace is just as important as the physical space that you're in.
Definitely.
You need to make sure the sleep is happening. You need to make sure that you're enjoying. When you go to a Commander game, you should be happy to go.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And like, even if you are a spike and you're listening to this episode as a spike and you're going, I need to get better, I need to get better, your want to get better should be driven by enjoyment.
Yeah.
And you should end up leaving going, man, I feel great. Like, I've never left the gym after hitting a PB and not been happy.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, like when I feel improvement in the gym, I feel great. But I do know friends that are going to the gym. I'm not going to call them out, but they leave the gym even if they have hit a personal best and they go, man, I could have gone more. I could have been better.
Yeah.
And it's this negative self-narrative that people tell themselves, and it translates to Commander, and I think it can be very negative for not only your Commander progression, but just generally in life.
Oh yeah, big time. And look, like it's not restricted to playing Commander as well. You can get over-obsessive with tinkering, as I've talked about a couple of times now on this podcast.
Well, you did a whole experiment to see if you could avoid the negative connotations of tinkering.
And there's a recent Commander's Herald article as well where I spoke with the architect in that recent article. You should check that out if you haven't already.
The architect more spoke with you, from how I read.
Yeah, he led the way, that's for sure. But yes, you can over-tinker as well in the same way, and you can get obsessive and going like, oh, that card didn't work. If I just had a different card, it would have worked better. And it's like, no, just like chill out.
Yeah.
Slow down. You can just change a card at a time. You don't have to rebuild the whole deck every week.
Don't feel pressured to.
No.
I like the architect for that reason.
Yeah.
Anyway, check out that article, link in the show notes. Go check it out.
My 6th and final training principle, and this is arguably the most important one, and I've kind of already alluded to it just now: consistency trumps all else.
Yeah.
Everything else aside, like if you nail every single other principle that I've just said in your training or in your Commander, but you're not consistent with your play or with your improvement, you won't go anywhere. You'll stop, you'll stagnate, you'll go backwards.
I get it. I mean, like I've said before, like we were talking about this literally just in the Thrifty Interlude. I'm nervous to go back to the gym because I've not been to the gym in like over a year now.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit like, I've not been very consistent with this at all. And my expectations of myself are high, and I'm not going to meet those.
It's hard to start again.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are people out there who, like, if we look at all those different principles we've looked at so far, there are people who tick all of those boxes with the right amount of volume and the right amount of reps and the right intensity levels and all these different things. But if they're not consistent with their training, they won't go anywhere. And likewise, there are people who don't tick any of those boxes, right? Who have like, well, not that they don't tick them at all, but they might have like theoretically bad amounts of volume for their exercises. Like they might be working at their muscle groups once a week. They might not be eating right. They might not be sleeping enough. They might be slightly overtraining.
Maybe not looking at their form as much.
Maybe. But if they're consistent with their training, they will always progress faster than someone who is not because they're consistent, right? It's just like, makes sense. And yeah, in the same way with Magic, if you play once, twice a month, and you're thinking about it and you're gradually improving your decks, you're still improving.
Yep.
And as long as you're consistent in applying yourself, you'll still get places.
Yeah, I think I said at the start of this episode, like just playing once a week is not going to get you as far as someone that's playing 4 times a week. But I think if you're playing once a week every week, as opposed to someone that's playing 4 times a week every other week or every week and a bit, or random points of the year, like maybe plays 4 times a week for 3 weeks but then doesn't play for 6 months, your approach to it and your consistent improvement is going to be more noticeable than the other person, for sure.
Definitely. And also, like, the you can play less and apply yourself more and get more out of your total Commander games. You know what I mean? Like people who play a lot of Commander can sometimes get into a bit of a rhythm of just like playing the same games over and over again. I think
especially in the same pods and stuff like that. Yeah.
And with the same decks, like they get stuck in the same ruts and the same like decision trees. But there are people who play less frequently, but they like make so much more out of their time. You know what I mean? Like there's players who like rock up at a game and they're like, okay, which deck am I going to play? I'm going to play this one. I'm going to try and get better at this. Like they've really like, they've got like intention in their mind as to why they're playing and what they're aiming for. And also those people have way more fun.
Yeah.
Way more fun.
I'm just thinking about like sometimes when we sit down to play together, we'll be like, oh, I can't. And part of this episode has come about because of the language Walt and I use around Commander.
Yeah.
You use get the reps in quite consistently.
I do.
And like you'll sit down and say, oh, I kind of need to get the reps in with this deck. I'm like, all right, I'll match, I'll hit the same exercises as you. And it's like we're going to the gym together in a weird way. Like, you know, you'll play a responsey deck, so I'll play a responsey deck as well. And we're kind of like in the gym together. And I think as like a general tip, if you are looking at improving based on these, you know, 6 principles that Walt has laid out here, find a friend, share this episode with them, and train together. Especially if you're already in the same pods as each other, you can get the reps in, eat well. You know, all of the advice that Walt's just shared, you can do this with a mate, and I think it's probably going to be better for you to do it with your pod than trying to train on your own in a pod that's not training with you.
Definitely. And if this might be the first bit of advice that goes back the other way, where I think equally, if you're trying to get into the gym, go with a friend.
Yeah.
If that's like your actual goal coming out of this is you're like, I'm good at all this magic stuff, but I want to get in the gym. Take this bit of advice to that as well.
Take a mate. Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, I always used to love running with friends. That was like one of the things. I love
you accountable.
I love running with music, and I would sometimes when I'd run with mates, I'd put headphones in.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'd carry like a Yui boom, like one of those portable speakers. And you know, it's hard to talk when you're on a run, but just the feeling of doing it with a friend is really something special.
Makes a big difference. Makes you want to do it again. Improving as a Magic player can feel a bit like 3 steps forward and then 3 steps back, but you will improve over time if you follow good principles. If you put in the reps, learn good form, include some essential exercises, cut when needed, avoid overtraining, and above all, apply yourself consistently to your training, you'll be the strongest player around sooner than you expect. So, Space Commanders, command received.
Feel good. This does feel like leaving the gym. You've got the endorphins pumping.
Got the pump on.
Ready to go. I'm actually gonna... you can't come, unfortunately, because you've got something else on this afternoon. But I'm going to cram a lot of Commander this afternoon.
Nice.
Some friends.
Get the reps in.
I'm going to go get the reps in. Feeling good.
To the listeners out there, do you feel commanded? And will your, quote, training regime be any different after this episode?
Yeah, reach out to us. Tell us how you approach your Commander experience. You might have listened to this episode and gone, I've never thought about Commander as something to train and something to practice. So yeah, if you want to tell us that you've never thought about it like that, get in touch with us on a bunch of different things. You can get in touch with us on Twitter, Instagram, or Threads, at Get Commanded on all of those. Best place to join at the conversation of the Get Commanded podcast is in the Get Commanded channel on the Greensboro Commander Community Discord server. We're there. All of our play group are there. We announce when we're going live and streaming, all that kind of stuff.
The article I came out with the other day was announced in there. So it's, a good place to keep up to date on what's going on.
That's where we're at.
Definitely. And of course, we would be lost without our patrons over on Patreon. You can check it out. It's linked in the show notes. It's the best way to support the content that we make directly. We'd like to thank our patrons, Stella Tam, Fuzzy, and Bottomless Potamus, and an extra special shout out to Fletcher Cutting, who supports us in the Space Commander tier. You're the best.
You are the best. You know who else is the best?
Who's the best?
Palms Off Gaming for sponsoring this podcast, apparently since the 60s.
Yeah, 1969.
1969. It's a long time. Well, look,
long time.
Palms Off Gaming have actually been sponsoring this podcast for over a year now.
Yeah.
And considering this is our last episode for the year, I just wanted to say a really big shout out and thank you to Palms Off Gaming.
Yeah.
They make some really awesome stuff, and you definitely should go buy some of the stuff, because I've decided I'm replacing all of my my decks with their blackout sleeves.
I just bought 2 more sets of blackout sleeves actually for my brother.
Oh, for a Christmas present.
Yeah, so we do Kris Kringle in my family. We've done it for the last couple of years, and I got my older brother who, him and his partner are trying to like just play a little bit more Magic. And I happened to mention to them the other day the Lord of the Rings set, and they were like, "What?" They hadn't heard about this, and they were so pumped because they're both like huge Lord of the Rings fans.
You bought them the dual
starter
decks.
kits.
Yeah.
I didn't realize they were like, "Is there like a starter kit or something?" I was like, "I don't think so. Let me look it up." And there is.
There's actually, I think it's called a starter kit, right?
Yeah, it's Lord of the Rings starter kit. It's like a sort of Aragorn, it's Aragorn and Arwen wed, the green-white commander.
Versus like the Orc army.
No, it's versus Sauron. There's the black-red Sauron.
Yeah, sure.
It looks super sweet, but I bought a couple of sets of blackout sleeves for them as well.
I just think they're awesome sleeves.
They're really cool.
And look, if you do want to get your hands on all of this stuff, go to palmsoffgaming.com.au/#getcommanded and you get 10% off your purchase and you support us. And I will just say as well, if you do use that code, it does help us out with POG because Palms Off Gaming are doing some really exciting stuff in 2024. And I was literally last night chatting to some of the boys at Palms Off Gaming. Go subscribe to their YouTube channel as well. We've done one episode of their podcast with them, but there might be some content coming out with them with your favorite Space Commander boys in the future.
You might have to wait a little bit, but someday.
It's exciting.
It is exciting.
Go get connected. So again, the link is in the show notes, but it's palmsoffgaming.com.au/#getcommanded. 10% off.
Check them out. That's all the Magic stuff for this week, I reckon. We better planeswalk out of here. I think it's your turn again.
Yeah, and we're gonna do music again because I feel like there's a couple of different categories of planeswalks. It's Star Wars,
other nerdy
content, or like technology, like you spoke about your computer, or music.
Yep.
And I want to do music this week.
Okay.
Specifically, a very local band. When I mean very local, I mean the lead singer literally lives down the road from here.
Oh wow.
Incredible artist, Terra Rouge.
You told me about them before, I think.
Yeah, I think you'd really like them. They're kind of like, in terms of a vibe, imagine kind of like a kind of rock and roll style jazz club where it's like really dimly lit. The lead singer would be in like a red dress with red lipstick and a spotlight on. And it's all in black and white, but the only thing that's in color is the dress and the lipstick. That kind of vibe, right?
Sin City. You're describing the film Sin City.
Yes, I am. Good one, actually. Yeah. That kind of vibe. But then she's also now evolving into a bit of a garage punk vibe as well.
Cool.
So it's like, it's a really cool blend of musical like genres.
Yeah.
And also like her stage presence is just fantastic.
Cool.
Terra Rouge is her name. She has a great backing band called the Redbacks. The reason why I'm shouting her out specifically is because she's going on tour next year in February. I will link, I don't think there's anything announced specifically yet, but I've linked her Instagram in the show notes. So go check out her stuff.
Yeah.
But the other exciting bit is I'm going on tour with her.
That's right. You're driving the van.
I am driving the van.
He's the van boy.
I am the van man. So I know Terra Rouge through some like local connections.
Yeah.
But basically, I will be driving a van, but occasionally just helping out set up the stage and do all the techie stuff with the musicians.
And you're hoping
kind of
to sneak your way onto the drum kit, I believe. If you can.
If I can, I'd love. I've not played live music in front of people for a really long time, so
that'd be cool.
I'm gonna go to a couple of shows in January with her and just kind of like I know the band like through social circles, but like don't know them personally.
Yeah.
And if I'm driving them up to Brisbane and driving to Canberra and Adelaide and doing all that, like I want to be able to know them well.
Yeah.
So
sick.
it's really exciting.
That's really exciting.
I'm keen as, but I'll let you guys know like when the show dates are, like via posts or something.
Definitely.
I'll share Terra Rouge's Instagram on our Instagram or something.
Cool.
But she's amazing. Definitely check her out. If you want some song recommendations, I really recommend Rock and Roll Band. That's one of my favorites. Another one is Fuckboy. I think that song is so good. If you are a young female in Australia, you will love this song. One of the first lines of the song is, "I'm so sick and tired of tiny little toxic men." And it just hits so well. But yeah, Terra Rouge, check her out. She's awesome.
Oh, very nice. Well, that's all we have time for. So we'll see you next Friday for another transmission from the Space Commanders.
Yes, Merry Christmas for those who celebrate and Happy New Year. Goodbye, Commander players.